Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. Topics up for discussion this week included the local authority housing funding gap, entertainment venues catering for the needs of those with disabilities, and incentives to bring Manx students back to the island. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Could a relaxation of the work permit system be harmful to Manx workers? The announcement last week that work permit restrictions will be eased to alleviate skill shortages is causing concern for union bosses. They accept there needs to be changes in some sectors to address the situation, but feel workers could be threatened by wholesale measures. Workers' rights could be threatened by wholesale measures. But the Chief Minister says with skill shortages hindering business expansion, a move to ease the work permit system could help attract more business to the island. Howard Quayle has moved to reassure an island trade union over the plans. What do you think about this? Could a relaxation of the work permit system be harmful to Manx workers, or would it help businesses to operate to their full potential and encourage new ones to set up here? Malcolm got in touch before the programme, actually. He said he wasn't sure if we were going to be talking about this or not, but if we were, he says it seems that our government believe that by relaxing the work permit rules, allowing exemptions in areas will provide economic growth, with more businesses being attracted to the island along with the necessary employees. I believe that they've got this totally wrong, says Malcolm. The current work permit system is very relaxed and obtaining a permit is not difficult. Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. Why are businesses not coming here? Why are employees not relocating to the island? Very simple. We're not as attractive anymore as a place to live. Benefit of our low tax regime is being well outstripped by the cost of living. In my opinion, the government needs to tackle the cost of utilities, the cost of necessities, the cost of housing. Businesses will come here if they're sure that they'll be able to obtain a happy workforce, which won't happen until the cost of living here is considerably reduced. That's according to Malcolm. I think he makes some very, very good points there. We've often said on the programme that, people who complain about the high cost of things like utilities, at least that's offset by the low taxation. But I think if you get beyond the point where that has a positive effect on your standard of living, then I think he's quite right to raise that. I don't know whether or not you agree with him. 2 pensioners just got the gas bill 100% more than gas consumed. That'll encourage more people to relocate to the Isle of Man, won't it? No, it won't, will it? And that's something that really I wish this government had grasped. This whole thing about the standing charge, I think, is wrong. What about all these Manx kids doing silly courses that will only lead to the dole queue? Well, I don't know whether or not they are silly courses, a lot of these things. And, at least they're getting some sort of training. What's the alternative to it? I mean, if you want to do a media studies course, for example, and somebody says, no, we're short of plumbers, so you're going to have to do a plumber's course instead, then that wouldn't be fair necessarily. The public sector bloat has to be reduced. OK, well, that comes up quite often, doesn't it? I have to chuckle at Eric Holmes complaining about the importance of maintaining the work permits, protecting us Manx workers and keeping people out. Where's he from? Oh, yes, Liverpool, says Neil. I don't know if he is. Is he from Liverpool? He's got a Liverpool accent, but I don't know. Interesting. Let me just throw this one into the mix as well. I think the principle of the work permit system is a pretty good one, and the idea of protecting Manx workers, I think, fundamentally is a good one and is in the interests of the Isle of Man. However, I do worry sometimes that this form of protectionism breeds a sort of a complacency where somebody thinks, OK, well, I'm the best qualified Manx person, so even if somebody comes along who's much better qualified than me generally, but they'd need a work permit, I know that I'll get the job. I wonder if that sort of complacency is as widely spread as I maybe suspect it is. I don't know. Alan says a lot of these employers are reaping what they've sown. They've stopped in-house training and apprenticeships, now just want to go for the cheaper option of getting off-island labour. Work permits may stop some firms from setting up here as they can't get the staff they require, but I would suggest the utilities cost put more firms off. That from Alan. OK, I still don't quite get this thing about the cheaper option of getting off-island labour. I don't see why there is a cheaper option. We've got minimum wage legislation, so surely you can't. I mean, I've employed people who've needed work permits and local people, and they get paid exactly the same. So, I can't imagine this whole thing about getting cheap labour. This might help us, though. Stu, ask any Manx tradesman in the construction trade. They'll tell you the industry is full of cheap labour working without permits. well, that should just be clamped down on instantly, shouldn't it? I mean, that's, again, it's one of those things that the legislation is there and it's not being enforced. And why is it not being enforced? You've got scaffolder, painters, plasterers in firms employing Polish people on rates as low as £8 an hour self-employed. No checks are ever done on construction jobs. These are true facts. Well, something needs to be done about that. So here's a call from this programme for government to look into it. If there are people working on construction sites without work permits that need work permits, that needs to be investigated as a matter of some urgency, I would suggest. So let's see what happens about that. Bob called. That contributor's perfectly right when he says the biggest obstacle to people coming here is the cost of living and utilities. Who'd want to come to a jurisdiction that taxes pensioners? Says it all, really. Well, I think most jurisdictions tax pensioners if they've got sufficient income. We're no longer a low tax area. We're about the same as the UK now. Their tax allowances have gone up every year, where ours haven't. Bloke on the radio said for someone to live here to the same level as a low-paid worker in the UK, they'd need to earn 30 grand a year. OK, interesting. There are many good local building tradesmen can't get work due to the many foreign workers being employed at rates below what a local tradesman can charge under the Construction Federation terms and conditions. Isn't that one of the things, though, that the market sort of finds its level? Could it be, and I'm just throwing this out there, I'm not saying this is the case, could it be that the local tradesmen want to charge too much for the job? It's one of those sort of market-driven things. I don't know. And the other thing is that whenever you see, it seems to me that all my friends who've ever wanted to get a tradesman can't. You phone up the emergency 24-hour plumber because you're knee-deep in water and it's going to take a fortnight before he can turn up because he's busy. I don't know. Stu, we totally agree with the previous caller, Mark, about the cost of living. Hope our MHKs are listening. That's from Brian. I wonder if they would be so keen if we imported 24 MHKs with good brains and qualifications. Well, yeah, I mean, that's maybe concentrate them a little bit if you put it like that. Is not the minimum wage a cash per hour figure? If I'm right, employers can employ people above the minimum wage but below the amount a local would currently be paid for that job. An employer can't pay below the minimum wage. Certainly, you can pay above it. And I've said this before, and maybe I'm missing something, and that often happens. I'm not saying I've got the answer to everything, but it strikes me that any employer on the Isle of Man, especially a good Manx firm, would always rather employ Manx workers. It's simpler. I mean, people say it's easy to get a work permit for people. My experience is that it's not necessarily easy. You've got to jump through a number of hoops to get a work permit with somebody. You've got to prove that there's not a Manx person capable of doing the job, and it all takes an awful lot of time, especially if you've got an empty shop or an empty office or whatever, because you're trying to employ somebody to do the job. So it's much easier to employ Manx people if you can, and I can't understand why all these suggestions from people saying, oh well, all these people coming over and stealing our jobs. I think that the problem goes deeper than that, and I don't think it's because people are prepared to work cheaper. Even Douglas Corpy is taking foreign unskilled labourers ahead of locals. They're also not checking the subcontractors to see if they're bucking the system. We had self-employed Polish painters working on our estate last week. Why no checks being made? Councillors turn a blind eye to any complaints made. Well, if that's true, something needs to be done about it. Again, I would suggest that you're probably wrong, that Douglas Corpy can't afford to employ people if they've not done the checks that they need to do by law and they've not made sure that they're permitted. So I very much doubt that that's true. But, like I say, I've not got all the answers. What else have we got? I was on a permit in the 80s. My parents bought a business, but government still made it difficult for me to get a permit and job. It's not just permits that stop workers coming here. It's a lack of opportunities and the high cost of living. Yeah, I think a good few people agree with that. Thanks. No need to give my name, but if you wanted to make it clear that the department's been in contact and that we guarantee to follow up any specific allegation and do so within one working day, contact 682 393 and ask for the enforcement officers. Good. No need to give my name. If you wanted to make it clear, the department's been in contact and that we guarantee to follow up on any specific allegation. To do so within one working day, contact 682 393 and ask for the enforcement officers. Well, you can't say fairer than that, can you? The Isle of Man is the most expensive place in Europe to build your own home. And as someone who's both employed tradesmen in the UK and the Isle of Man, I can see why a tradesman is 150 a day in the UK for a long 8-hour day, but £250 a day in the Isle of Man for a short 8-hour day. That from Bob. Yeah, I suspect that's kind of more like it. I don't know. Manx firms not always the best to work for or are the most organised. No offence, but I speak from experience, says somebody else.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should local authority housing be self-funding? It's been claimed that public sector housing rents in Douglas would need to rise by nearly 9% to make that happen. A Douglas councillor says the gap between rents and the cost of running housing services must be plugged to ensure their continued use for future generations. However, after being criticised on social media, yes, I know how that feels, she insists that she's not suggesting such an increase be introduced. What do you think about this? Should local authority housing be self-funding? Is means testing the answer to plugging the funding gap? Surely means testing ought to be brought in, or shouldn't it? Personally, I've had enough of subsidising people's housing who could afford to pay more rent. This is from Alan. I work with at least 4 people who earn more than me but choose to live in social housing. Means testing is a must so that tenants pay a fair amount relevant to their income. Tommy called. I live in Williston. I bought my own house. Excuse me. It was about 40 years ago and the mortgage was 17 quid a week. Rent was £8.50, so half the mortgage at the time. If I bought the house today, the mortgage would probably be the same, but rents have gone up to around £100. I assume there's no need to means test, just ask the income tax people. They know exactly what people earn. They should sell some council houses off. There are far too many of them, says John. Are there? I was under the impression that there were too few of them, that we've got long waiting lists of people who want to go into social housing. So I can't see that there are too many. Might be wrong. I'm a homeowner with a mortgage, says somebody else. I would have no problem subsidising public sector housing if they were occupied only by people who need them. But they've got plenty of people in them who have more disposable income than I do. Stu, poor old corpy tenants. Don't know that adds to the debate necessarily. Stu, people should have to have a licence to be allowed children. If they can't afford them, then they should be. Why should the taxpayer have to prop it up? People have kids these days as it's a route to extra benefits and housing, which isn't right. Stu, maybe if they sold the motorhomes and quad bikes, one of the 4 50-inch TVs. What about the person in sheltered housing just sold a house for the best part of £300,000, says Graham. Lots of things should be means tested, including the state pension. This is just another holiday for those who are in receipt of a fat subsidised pension. Okay. Wage of the clerk who works in Peel is $100,000 a year, plus all outstanding pension payments, probably a good part of rent increases. And I'm not in a council house. I mean, those are the going rates for those jobs, I suppose, aren't they? And I don't know whether or not that has any bearing on the shortfall as far as social housing is concerned. It's clear that if it's only a 9% increase to make social housing cost neutral, then a reform of the system through some form of means testing could make this cost neutral, ensure those that can afford to pay more do so, and crucially, those who can't could pay less than they do now. Yes, that's true, and that's fair, isn't it? One point I'd like to make is when people talk about there being multiple earners in a property, often they're young adults staying at home to save some cash in the same way that homeowners' children would. Their income shouldn't be taken into account until they're 25 at least. So means testing, yes, but let's make it fair and think it through. Now, that's a good point. I work and live in social housing. Why don't they put the rent up by 4%, cut the wages of the MHKs and MLCs by the other 4%, as my taxes pay their wages, and slow them to retire at 55, says Neil. Okay, yes. It's a thought. Hey boy, what about those running businesses from commissioners' houses? Well, is that allowed or is it not? If it's not allowed, then report it. If it is allowed, I mean, just because you're running a business doesn't mean to say they're making a fortune either. Frank says if you can afford 3 weeks in Vegas gambling away, you can afford to pay more. Well, the people going to Vegas for 3 weeks might well spend 49 weeks of the year living on spuds and herring to save up for their annual holiday. So just playing devil's advocate is all. It's a shame Ace of Base changed the lyrics to their 1992 hit. I didn't see anything wrong with all that she wants is another baby in a big council house, says Rich. Well, you are kind of, clinging to a stereotype, and I'm not sure if it's true or not. Fed up with people banging on about subsidised social housing. Ours is substandard, full of damp and condensation. We pay a fair rent, which has risen a lot in recent years. It's not our fault that private landlords charge so much, says John. Well, if it's substandard, then surely they're doing something about it, aren't they? I mean, I know that there's an awful lot of building work going on in Williston and Pulrose and stuff, and most people would say that you're paying far below a fair rent. So, just again, trying to be fair about that, John. Up here in Ramsey, loads of families living in council houses that are making a fortune. This chap runs a very successful company, employing lots of people, making lots of money from each of his employees. Pub most nights, speedboat, caravans, you name it, he has it. Well, just be careful that isn't the politics of envy. They might all be on hire purchase or whatever. I don't know. It's maybe I am naive. I always look for the best in people, and sometimes it simply isn't there. But there you go. Let's go to the lines. We've got Eddie on, wants to talk about this. Hello, Eddie.
I listen to all these people with these wonderful ideas and all the rest of it. But I'd like to ask all of them how anybody over the age of 50 can get a mortgage these days.
You can't, I don't think.
Well, and so that's why people are stuck in housing.
Yeah.
And people seem to forget that. When your kids are growing up and you're looking after your children, you're around about the 50 years of age when they're leaving home and can set up for themselves.
Yep.
So you've got people left in tenants who now have got a good wage, but unfortunately, they can't get a mortgage.
Well, I'm renting, and I have been for the last however many years, certainly since I came to the Isle of Man. And it aggrieves me because every month that I pay my rent, I think there's money that I'm never going to see back. But, I've either had a job that would get me a mortgage because it's a steady job, or I've had a deposit. I never seem to have had the two things at the same time. And then I've got to the stage where I'm probably too old now to get a mortgage. It's something
you're stuck in the middle, aren't you?
Whatever you do, So I do feel very strongly about this,
And the nice part of it is when they turn around and say that you've got a nice car, you'll find that most of the nice cars up here, and especially in my estate, will be second-hand nice cars.
Yeah.
They're not new cars. Because they can't afford the brand new cars, but they can still afford a nice second-hand car.
Sure, yeah.
And people seem to forget those things. But also, at the present time, we're in a catch-22, especially here in Williston, because we're getting refurbished over the next 10 years or so. So we're living on a building site nearly all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got notices all around, vehicles heavy industrial vehicles moving around. But also the corporation then, because the houses are up for refurbishing, are very reluctant to do any repairs.
Well, I can see that,
understand.
Though. Yes, yeah.
So we're left in, you report repairs. I reported a repair 2 years ago.
Yeah, and they're reluctant to do it because at some point they'll be ripping into the house to repair it completely.
That's it. So we have to live with it.
Yeah.
And then people turn around and go, well, your rent's on so much and all the rest of it.
Yes.
I mean, basically, before I retired 16 years ago, we had a visit from somebody from the corporation and turned around and said to us, oh, don't decorate your bathroom or your toilet because we're going to refurbish them.
Gotcha.
Right? That was 16 years ago. You can imagine what my toilet and bathroom would be like if I hadn't gone in. Right? So we're still waiting patiently.
Right. Oh, well, it'll be worth it at the end of the day, Eddie.
That's if I'm still here, Sal.
Yeah. All right. I need to move on, but thank you very much for your call. Derek called. He said, who are most people? Well, when I say most people, I mean most people who phone this programme or get in touch with the comments. Where are the statistics? Well, I've not got any. I've just got an inbox that's full of comments. You say most people think tenants should pay more, but I could just as easily say that most people I know think they're paying too much rent. All I can say, Derek, is that I'm just giving you a consensus feel of the comments that we get on the programme. It's a generalisation and it's meaningless. One thing that should be queried is the inflated rates of private rents being charged here. I've asked the government and my MHK, and there's no wish to do anything to drive the rents down in the private sector. That's what the bad feeling over local authority rents is caused by. I have no doubt it's the gap between the rents paid with inflated private rents. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose that it's deeper than that, Derek. It's actually the cost of housing in the Isle of Man is inflated, isn't it? And that's what causes the inflated rents. But whether or not that's the answer, I don't know. It means testing, not practical. It could mean a tenant's rent could be continually changing as their situation changes. Yes and no. I mean, I don't know that most people's situations change an awful lot over the course of a year, but, if it does, then fine. If at one stage you need some help and then 6 months later you've got a new job and everything's in the garden's rosy, then isn't it only right that you ought to be reassessed for the amount of support you get? who can I ring to get someone to fix my property for free and give me a brand new kitchen? I don't think it's that simple. I mean, this is the trouble. I think that is sometimes the perception. But this is the trouble when people get too polarised about these things. And just a thought, just looking at the bigger picture, the ruling classes, the elites, love it that we end up fighting against each other over things like this and falling out with each other. Because while we're doing that, we're not looking at the fact that, 99% of everything in the world is owned or controlled by 1% of the people. Things like that are what really matter. And so the people that are in that 1% love it when we're fighting amongst ourselves about things like this. And this from Irene, which I think is particularly telling. I have just one word, Stu: Aleppo. Be thankful. Reasonable.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Is there enough disabled seating in the island's entertainment venues? Charity Manx Mencap says it's been fighting for a more inclusive, equal service in government-run buildings since 2013. As it stands, there are just 6 seats in the Gaiety, 8 in the Villa Marina and 2 in the Broadway Cinema. So what do you think about this? Do the island's entertainment venues do enough to cater for customers with disabilities? Or will there always be certain people who just can't be accommodated by venues around the island? First comment: even though there are a limited number of seats, they're underused. Okay. Same as at the supermarkets. More often than not, disabled spaces are less than half occupied. Well, that's true. I must admit, it is very irritating when you're driving around a car park and there are a number of spaces that are reserved for disabled parking which are empty. And you can't get a car, and that's quite often. Quite often I've driven around Shaw's Brown. It's been a case that there are no spaces left, but there are loads and loads of disabled spaces that nobody's using. Same thing at the supermarket. Certainly can't get a park anywhere near the front of the shop, but all the disabled spaces are empty. So yes, I've noticed that, I must admit. What else have we got? It's not only entertainment venues. My husband and I went to a talk at Elmwood House, which is part of Isle of Man College, only to be faced with a steep flight of steps outside the front door and a lecture room on the first floor, says Muriel. Yeah, I appreciate that. The worry is that if everything that we build has to be wheelchair accessible, it's going to change the entire look of the island, isn't it? And it means that you're not going to be able to use first floors, for example, unless you put lifts in and things like that. And the cost of all that is quite hideous. Certainly when we were planning the layout of our business 3 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago now probably, we were told that we had to have a disabled toilet on the premises, and so that was a bit of a surprise, to be honest. And I said to the planning people, well, yeah, but we've not got disability discrimination legislation in, so do we have to do this? Oh yes, because even though we've not got the legislation in, we are following the guidelines. Now, to an extent, you can see the sense of that. I don't know that anybody has ever used the disabled loo, to be honest, in 3.5 years. I mean, it's available to other people as well, so other people tend to use it, but I don't know that anybody who's got a disability has needed the facilities that we provide, but it is a cost for businesses. So I'm not quite sure what the answer is to that, but what do you think? Do you sometimes go to places and think, the disability access is pretty poor here, they really ought to do more about it? Or do you think that people, generally nowadays, I think that most people make a great effort to do things which are practically possible? I think that maybe there will always be things that you can't do. I don't know. Should that be the case? Should there always be an answer to disability access? Stu, unfortunately the Victorians didn't cater for the unfortunate. New theories cost money. Who pays? New rooms sweeping clean. Need to wake up to a proper life. Right, okay, I expect I'm being got at there, but I'm not quite sure how or why. Elmwood House at the college has disabled access at the back of the building. There's a lecturer who uses a wheelchair who works there, says Ian. Right, okay, well, perhaps Muriel didn't know that. So Elmwood House at the college does have disabled access at the back of the building. You might find it annoying when you can't get a parking space. Well, I do. Imagine how annoying it is when somebody who's entitled to that space finds it being used by a lazy person who will only be a minute. That's from Sean in Upper Douglas, parent of an adult disabled daughter. Massively annoying, absolutely. I think that anybody who uses a disabled space and isn't entitled to use it should be taken out and flogged in public and have rotten tomatoes thrown at them, so I don't have a problem with that at all. But, I do wonder that sometimes planners and people in control of these things go too far the wrong way with it. And, I would challenge anybody to say that where there are disabled parking spaces, for example, they're always used, because in my experience, they rarely are. There are rarely very many cars in them at all, but somebody's decided at some point, in a car park of X number of spaces, then a certain percentage needs to be disabled access. Maybe that figure needs to be looked at, I don't know. Robin Peel called. I'm semi-disabled now. I find it difficult to find a comfortable seat when I go out to places. It's getting so that people with disabilities just don't bother going out because they're not sure if they'll be able to get a seat somewhere. Venues should show that they're doing something, make it known so people can go there. It'll help to give disabled people a bit more fun in their lives, help them to get out more. Yeah, okay, but I mean, maybe the onus is on you as well, Rob, to, if there's something that you fancy, then phone up and see whether or not there is access there. See whether or not it's the sort of thing that you want to do and whether or not you can actually get in there properly. Alan says all new buildings have disabled access and facilities. It's the older buildings that cost a fortune to adapt. But let's face it, if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on your point of view, to live a long age, the chances of requiring disabled facilities will increase. Yes, that's a point as well. As long as we don't make it too onerous, so that we're over providing. Certainly, there needs to be action taken to stop people from under providing. But I do worry sometimes that we over provide. That's not sensible either, is it? Perhaps the disabled parking spaces would be used if people with disabilities were catered for properly and they had accessible places to go to. Okay, I'm talking about the supermarket. So, I mean, the supermarket is accessible to people in wheelchairs or with disabilities. All that I'm saying is that there are usually an awful lot of empty spaces there. So, you are catered for properly, surely. Are you not? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Where would you like to go that you can't go to now because you're not catered for properly? Let me know, and we'll see if we can do anything about it on the programme today. There you go. There's a bit of a challenge. ShopRite Victoria Road, disabled space is always well filled, says JC. Right, okay. Well, I'll check it next time I'm up there, because I tend to use the other shop because it's on my way home. But I'll go up there and check that out. And if you're right, then absolutely, I'll take it back. Stu, I'm sure that you're being deliberately provocative. Rumbled. You worked out me MO. I'm sure you're being deliberately provocative, but A, imagine being disabled and all the parking spaces are being used by able-bodied, lazy people. Well, like I say, take them out, flog them. B, disabilities aren't always visible. True. If your disability affects your bladder control, for example, then an easily accessible disabled toilet is a godsend. Glad your business has got one. Good. Okay, well, that's a reasoned point. Yeah, I can accept that. So I think legislation recognises that certain areas are not suitable for direct disabled access, so providing due notice, given or a request for assistance is sought, then the proviso has been met. With regard to disabled parking spaces, supermarkets or similar, I think a specific number must be fulfilled. Parent and child spaces are a different ball game altogether, though, says Howard. Yes. I've been more tempted to do that a couple of times when I've gone down to the supermarket and I can't find a space. I drive the full length of that supermarket down in Douglas sometimes, and there's just nothing anywhere and a million people in. So usually what I do is that I decide I'm going to come back another day when it's quieter. But if you really need to pop in there, then it is irritating, especially if you drive past all those mother and child spaces and they're empty, and then the disabled spaces are empty. Like I say, I wouldn't dream of parking in a disabled space, but the mother and children... And you think through the logic of it, well, if you're a mum and you've got children there, you need a bit of space and all the rest of it, and to rustle up the kids and wrangle them around the place. Well, hang on a minute, I'm getting on a bit. I'm not as able as maybe I once was, not quite as lithe to roll out of the sports car. Maybe I deserve some of that space myself, and nobody's using them, so why not? I haven't done, but I have been tempted. comment here from Phil. He says, Stu, really, you sometimes see disabled places empty. I often go to Douglas and other places. Amazingly, although there are 80+ thousand non-disabled people in the Isle of Man, incredibly, I can't find parking space. I can find parking spaces. Let's go to the lines. We've got Hans on. Hello, Hans.
I must say, one building that's good to get into is Markwell House.
Right.
But to get to it is hilarious.
Okay.
Certainly when you're on crutches.
Oh, yes.
When you walk there, the pavement, the first thing you come to is the crossing.
Yes.
So you have got those horrible knobs to walk on, and there is not really a space where it's even. You can't really walk down to on that side to ShopRite.
Right.
Because it's feasible, but it's not funny.
Well, in fairness, I mean, there is a bit of elevation change around there, isn't there, around the back of the Strand Centre?
Yes,
It's just geography, I would have thought.
And the nearest, the nearest bus stop is out on the Brom.
Yes.
So I feel that a place like that should be accessible to everybody.
Okay. All right. That's not a bad idea actually, because there will always be places that you can't get disabled access properly, but maybe they ought to be used by things that don't require disability access. So you might be right. Maybe that places that do need wheelchair or other access are located in a more sensible location, near bus stops and things like that. Some good points there, Hans. Thanks for getting in touch with us today. Stu, you're right. I take my 95-year-old dad to the supermarket and we don't get designated parking areas, says John. Well, that's the thing. It's, it seems a little bit selective about who does get priority parking. Mothers and children do, and disabled people do. Maybe your dad's eligible for some sort of a disability badge or something like that might work. I don't know. What else? I'd like to see access for the Palace Cinema. Is there not access to the Palace Cinema? I'd like children or adults not to be confined to the back of the theatre. Parking spaces are rarely empty at busy times. At other times, the whole car park can have many available spaces, so it's very rare that the only available spaces are disabled access spaces. Right. Further to that, this is a different person altogether. Sent a text earlier on just to confuse us all. Further to that, I should add that my daughter, being the positive person that she is, qualified as an interior architect, makes sure that all new buildings she works on are disability friendly. That's from Sean, who's still in Upper Douglas. I never doubted it, Sean. Let's go to the lines. We've got Fenella on. Hello, Fenella.
Just heard the lady you said about a father in his 90s,
Yes.
and she takes him shopping. If she asks social services or government anyway, they'll ask she better have a word with his doctor.
Right.
He will write a letter or say that, or fill a form in to say that he's eligible for a disabled badge because of he probably walks slowly and
Yes.
he's probably a bit stumbly, because I know my mum was.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I got her to get a badge.
So you think there might be some help available then?
I think there could be, yeah.
Good.
Because most people my mother was in her 80s, and she just went very slow, and
Yes.
so it was such a help to be able to park near the
Where you were going to, sort of thing.
the lift.
Yeah.
And we could get into the lift, straight down. She could get the trolley. She could go with the trolley. She was quite quick with that.
Yeah.
And it just made life so much easier.
Brilliant. Oh, good bit of advice. Thank you very much for calling, Fenella.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
What incentives could be rolled out to attract newly qualified people from the island back home? And should we be bribing young people in this way? Just a thought. It may be good for the island, but is it always good for them long term? The Department of Education and Children is trialling paying the tuition fees of Manx employed secondary school teachers returning to the Isle of Man to work. 23 primary school and 47 high school teachers will reach retirement age over the next 10 years. We heard this in the news. That deficit is compounded with a UK teacher shortage. The DEC minister says more incentives need to be introduced to retain talent for the island schools. Graham Crugene, says the steps are a work in progress. What incentives do you think could be put in place to attract Manx students back to the island once they've qualified in their chosen field? And actually, should incentives be rolled out like this, or is it more important that the island attracts the right employees rather than just those who grew up here? Next year, we have a child going to university. The fees alone are $15,000 a year. We then have the cost of lodgings and support, etc. What gets my back up is we have and will continue to pay taxes, part of which is towards education. Being self-employed all our lives, paying a mortgage and no private pension, we will not or will struggle to pay our child's uni education unless we remortgage our home, which will put us in poverty. There is an alternative. The percentage of my taxes for 50 years of work should continue to cover any further education instead of funding handouts for people that are not prepared to work hard, and put more back into the island's growth, says Pat. And Frank says, hey boy, I wonder how many of these poor hard-done-to teachers about to retire with six-figure payouts are going to return on the relief list. Sheer out-and-out greed. No wonder there's no young teachers in the profession. Questions, facts, says Frank. Questions, I think, Frank, and I don't know that any of them make any sense at all, to be honest. Are you suggesting that when somebody gets to retirement age, you've got to retire? You've got no options, you've got to retire, you've got to sit in the deck chair or do the garden, you can't work again. I couldn't afford to do that. When I get to retirement age, I'm going to have to keep on working, otherwise my quality of life is going to disappear completely. Now, maybe if I had a six-figure pension, don't know whether or not teachers do or not. I don't know whether or not I would still choose to work if I didn't have to, but I think an awful lot of people have to work. Let's go to the lines. We've got Brian on. Hello, Brian.
My son's at university at the moment. It's costing me about 25 grand a year for him to sit there. And
that's a lot of beer, that, yeah.
It's a lot of beer. But I make a few very quick points, and because there are a few of them, so I'll be as brief as possible.
Right.
First of all, my son's 20 years old. He wanted to go to university. First thing the government do is means test me and decide what's going to be paid, for his education.
Yeah.
Now, if he was female, pregnant, and looking for a local authority house at 16, my financial position wouldn't come into the equation. So, bit of a strange disparity there as far as I'm concerned. At what point does your offspring become independent?
Well, yes. I mean, the other thing about that, though, Brian, is that one is that somebody needs somewhere to live, and the other is that somebody wants to have further education. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that Albert Goubet's daughter is entitled to a local authority house, which is in great need and sponsored by the taxpayers.
I take your point.
Right?
Go on, crack on.
That's the first thing. The second thing is 25,000 a year. It is a bit of a kicking. It would be nice if I could claim tax relief on that, but I can't even claim tax relief on the money that I have to send to him.
Oh.
Right. So that's a bit of an annoyance as well.
I didn't realise that, to be honest. I thought that on your tax return you were able to claim allowances for money used for educational purposes.
Oh, I wish.
Oh, okay.
But this is the most important point as far as I'm concerned. And this is where I think we failed successively. The Isle of Man is an insular community.
Yes.
Now, I've told my son, go to university. If you come back with a swimming certificate, that's fine. The most important thing is to get off this rock and broaden your horizons.
Yes.
Any qualifications you pick up along the way are, a bonus.
Incidental, yeah.
They're incidental. You've got to broaden your horizons. Go and see. There's a big wide world out there, and, you should reap the benefits of being able to go and see it.
Yes.
As an island, regrettably, we are desperately short of resources, natural resources. We haven't got any lead, tin, copper, oil, coal, gas. We haven't got anything really that we can draw upon.
Okay.
So we have got, in our future, we have got to find something that's going to attract businesses to the island. And the only way you can attract businesses is if you've got an educated population that can work for those businesses.
Okay.
Now, you could train them all as plumbers. That's fine. Then you've got a lot of plumbers. But plumbers, generally speaking, will do work in-house. They won't generate income for the Isle of Man.
Okay.
We have to find businesses that are actually going to bring cash to our shores,
Yeah.
not move the money around that we've already got. And to that end, the only thing we can do to try and make the Isle of Man more attractive, or not the only thing, but one of the things that we need to do to make the Isle of Man more attractive is to offer a workforce to any business that's in the United Kingdom, a potential workforce that they can draw upon. Nobody wants to move to the Isle of Man with their business and then have to ship all their personnel here as well.
And tax breaks, of course.
And tax incentives, and we've got to improve our links to the United Kingdom, because it's no use having one boat every week and that being a sailing vessel, is it?
All right, some good points there, Brian. Thanks very much for getting in touch. Need to move on because we've got Jill on as well, who's a former teacher and might well have some good points on this. Hello, Jill.
Hi, Stu.
Hi.
I'd just like to say to Frank, I would very much appreciate a six-figure pension. I started teaching 50 years ago. And I was one of the lucky ones who had a grant, £142 a year. I mean, I don't know what that is in today's money.
Well, you could buy a house with that, though, in those days.
No, you couldn't. Not quite. But when we trained, because we'd had a grant, we were expected to go back and work for the local authority for at least 5 years.
Okay.
And the thing is, I was a primary school teacher. Now, I've got to do the basics. And if I don't do my job properly, you can have every secondary teacher in the world who's brilliant.
Yeah.
They're not going to get very far.
True.
Because the kids can't do it.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, and yes, they need something if you want them back on the island. I agree with your last speaker. They do need to get out in the world and live a bit.
Yes. Well, that's my concern about this. In that, on one side of the argument, I can see that it's a good thing to get people that have been that are from the Isle of Man, get them back here and incentivise that to happen. But I wonder if that's actually the best thing for them. Wouldn't they be better spending 5 years somewhere other than the Isle of Man, getting some life experience and stuff before they come back? But I don't know. It's not simple, is it?
It isn't. No, but I mean the biggest thing is to get good teachers.
Yeah.
You know, because otherwise you're wasting your money, whatever you do with it.
Yeah, fair comment. All right, thank you very much for getting in touch, Jill. Going to university is a privilege, not a right. Why should anyone who starts work at 16 have to pay towards a graduate's education through their income tax? Students should have to either come back to the island to work for a set period of time or repay the costs of the university education over a set period of time. That from Josh. No, they would make much better teachers, etc. if they first gain some experience in the wider world. No one should go straight from school to university and then back to school on the island. This is an insular, sheltered island. Better they teach elsewhere first, says Joe. Okay. I agree with Frank. Lots of government workers, teachers, police, etc. get early retirement with a lump sum, then go on to work for government in teaching or backroom police and get another wage. Stu, an example of wrongdoing to our students. Students wanting to go to university get very little help. Many young Manx people leave school without an education, can just sit on the backside being kept by the rest of us through state benefits. Really? Parents don't get any tax relief or for any cost to cover further education. At least the majority of these people going to university can speak properly to your potential clients when the courses are finished. For example, would Sir like fries with that order, says Mal. Yeah, I think if they've got university education from across, they're probably likely to come back and say, can I get fries with that? To which the answer is no, unless you've got health and safety training on working with hot fat. Regarding university students, there was an option for parents to make a deed of covenant, i.e. some of their income not taken into account before tax when our two boys went to university. Is this not still the case? I believe probably not. That was from Pete. My mum was a pensioner when my sister went to university and she had to work 3 jobs to pay the fees. You don't hear her moaning about it, says Jan. Right. Yeah, well, you're probably right. You probably don't. I've been corrected by Frank, you see. Hey, boy, I've got nothing against people working after retirement. Really, Frank. However, as on Manx Radio's news page, MHK Julia asked a question in Tynwald, how many teachers, civil servants that have taken a retirement and pension payout only to return to government? Now, if these retirees are so desperately need cash, why don't they go into the private sector? Well, I don't know that you can go into the private sector if you're an ex-teacher or something like that, can you, or an ex-civil servant? And is it that they're desperate for the cash, or is it that the employer is desperate for the skills? And just to correct you, says Frank, I said 6-figure payoff, not pension. Oh, you're just envious, Frank. I mean, so am I. There's nothing wrong with being jealous of people who've got lots and lots of money, because I've never had lots and lots of money, not for years anyway. And so I'm envious as well. But, we all make our life choices, don't we? And some people pay into a scheme for their entire working lives and then get some money out of it at the end of it. Not a bad thing necessarily, is it? Question for your listeners. Would they rather see part of the taxes pay towards university costs for the few, or pay the cost to keep poorly educated jobless on the dole? Best to get some return for your taxes than none at all. Right, OK. Surely you need the businesses here to attract the students, not the other way around. Well, I don't know. I think it is one of those sort of circular arguments that you need to have the educated workforce to get the businesses, and then you need the businesses to pay. It's that kind of a thing, isn't it? Children at university should be able to claim weekly state benefits the same way that the young unemployed can. At the end of the day, they're both unemployed. That's something that I'd never really thought about, but yes, I expect you're probably right. Interesting thought, that. My brother was educated on the Isle of Man. The government paid for his further education to get a BSc degree in electrical engineering, then a master's. He was always involved at the sharp end of tech and gained a good 20 years industry experience. He was a relatively young man in his 40s. He returned home to the island to bring his experience and knowledge here. Unfortunately, he was drawn into a civil lawsuit. He was shocked at how the wheels of so-called justice turned, and he left in disgust, saying he was never going to come back. Unless you're particularly well connected, I can't blame anyone for not wanting to return to a place such as this, says Chris. Well, that's sad. Rob says, we tend to have doctors from all over the world. I'd like to see them stay where they are because they're good, but we need to create opportunities for Manx people to return and get top positions. There were a lot of students who went off to study archaeology and the like when there were opportunities here, but now there are no jobs, so they have to stay off island to work. We haven't got the opportunities here to come back for. And according to your speaker called Brian, he expects the government to pay $25,000 a year to go to university for a bit of fun. Doesn't care if his son works or not. I know of lots of people over the years got full grants to go to uni. They then left and didn't even use the qualifications at the end of it. What a waste. Right. Hey boy, hasn't Manx Radio's intern got a degree in politics? What's he doing as a reporter, says G. I don't know, but I would have thought that was a perfect qualification for a reporter, certainly somebody who covers politics, to know the questions to ask. Are there no ex-graduates on the dole, says somebody else, or is it just the intellectually challenged claiming benefit? Just because people go to uni doesn't make them a superior race. A degree in common sense is quite often the best one. Yes, I agree with that.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Are the temporary repairs to Douglas Prom worthwhile? As the resurfacing work along Douglas Promenade continues, the long-term future of the area remains unclear. The current plan, improving the surface between Castlemona Avenue at the bottom of Summerhill, has already been described as only a short-term fix. So, have you seen it yet? Is the temporary resurfacing worthwhile? Has it made a difference to your journey already, or will it equate to spending the money twice? Should it have been left until the full reconstruction could be carried out? Tell us what you think about it. And I'm indebted to Keith, who sent me a picture of it, and well, it looks a bit like a cake that's being iced just in the middle. It's only the sort of the wear surface that seems to have been recovered. So at the side where the cars park, it hasn't, and probably that makes sense when you think about it. But it looks a little bit like a Mohican haircut. But have you experienced it? Is it good news or not? A waste of money, says Alan. It'll probably last 12 months, then back to what it was. We've waited 70 years to have the job done properly. What's a couple more to wait? Imagine the uproar if Mr. Gorn had wasted 40,000 quid. This money could have filled a hell of a lot of potholes properly, says Alan. Well, thinking about it, it probably has filled a lot of potholes. Along the promenade at the very least. You should really do a Dave Allen sitting on stage telling you stories wasted on Talking Heads, says John. Well, that's very kind, John. It's just sometimes if you stay around as long as I have, you sort of do end up with a few stories. I just hope that they're reasonably amusing and not too dull. Oh no, the road's being fixed, temporarily at least. One less thing to moan about on your show, Stu. I'm sure there'll be more topics by the by. Welcome the temporary fix, and I'm sure my fellow motorcyclists will agree. That's from Kev, who says for us all to enjoy our weekends. Thank you very much, Kev. Hi, Stu. Good temporary job on the prom, long overdue and only necessary because of failure to make sensible decisions earlier, says John. Well done, Ray Harmer, a man of action, says somebody else. Now, they're not signing it. Please, everybody make a note. It's November the 25th, 2016. It's 12:25 in the afternoon, and somebody has congratulated the Minister at the DOI and said that he's a man of action. Let's see how long that lasts. Stu, about the prom resurfacing work, excellent. Get a single tram line down the middle and the job's a good one. Sack a few engineers and planners and do it every year. Simple. Well, the sort of cost that we're talking about, 40,000 quid, I mean, I presume that it is just a bit like sort of laying a driveway. You just drove a truck along that sort of disgorged tarmac off the back of it, or asphalt. I'm not sure what the difference is between the two. Rolled it, and that's the job done. Now, even if it does break up every year, then it seems to be an awful lot cheaper than the alternatives, although the experts and the minister did say that, you know, it's a bit like an iceberg. It's all very well talking about the surface, but that really is only part of the job, and the majority of the work needs to be done on the foundations and the services underneath them. Prom's great until you fall off the end of it back into the third world road, but soon to be done. Don't care what it looks like. It's a joy. Please don't let him back to the grand scheme plans again. Just keep everything the same, but with a nice road, says Liz. Good. Have you used the promenade since it's had its coat of tarmac? Do you think it's better or not? Or do you think it's a waste of money on the basis that the job still needs doing properly? So is this just throwing money away? Get in touch and tell us on 66 13 68. It's always good to hear different voices on the programme. Bob called in a little while ago. He didn't want to go on air, but he did say this would be a great opportunity to sort out the traffic lights at the bottom of Broadway, and wouldn't a roundabout make more sense down there? I don't know, maybe it would. It does seem a strange junction, that really, doesn't it, where traffic can't turn right going south along the promenade up Broadway. It does seem to be less than ideal. It forces people to go down to the next roundabout, the big roundabout outside the Gaiety, and have to turn round there, which I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I suppose it does cut down on a potential logjam during the rush minute in the morning along the prom. But if you've got a point of view about that as well, do you think a roundabout would be better at the bottom of Broadway, or do you think the traffic lights work fairly well? What's this text? Gorn is on Manx net saying the prom resurfacing is a waste of taxpayers' money. Ha! He wasted 3 million on nothing. Well, I don't think he wasted 3 million quid on nothing, did he? It wasn't 3 million quid, was it? And the fact of the matter is, I mean, let's just consider this rationally now as grown-ups. You see, if I was elected benevolent dictator for life, or had been some time ago, then we'd have a nice monorail running across Douglas Bay at the moment. The horse trams would be retired out to Richmond Hill or somewhere like that, or up to Ramsey or Jerby. And the road would have been resurfaced, probably with a nice sort of teak effect laminate flooring, because they have to put a self-levelling compound down first. So it would all look quite completely and absolutely lovely, but a lot of people would hate it. I wouldn't care, because I'd have a big security force as benevolent dictator for life, so nobody would be able to get at me. But we don't have that situation. We live in a democracy, and we elect politicians to do the best job that they can for us. And so if we've got an opportunity, and I've always thought this, if we've got an opportunity because we've got to do some work to maybe improve things, or maybe do things in a different way, do we not want to at least consider the options? And that's what Phil Gorn did. And everybody's saying, oh, it's a waste of money and getting all these planners, and we all knew right from the start what we should do. Well, but isn't that exactly what we employ politicians to do? To look at options, present us with the options, and then do what we want. So I think it's unfair to say that it's a load of wasted money, because it could have gone the other way, where people looked at the Rolls-Royce scheme and said, do you know, that's exactly what we want. Let's have some of that. Where do we vote? Where do we sign up for that? It's just that it didn't, because in the other hand, we don't like change. Just a thought. Stu, 40,000 quid, are they serious? Yeah, I believe so. If that's the true cost, it's an absolute bargain. That stuff's around 200 quid a tonne. Never mind the cost of wagons, digging it up, etc. Somebody should ask how that price adds up. Mind you, it is Black Friday. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a bunch of Irish lads working out the back of a rattly old transit van or something like that. We've got some tarmac here that's left over from a motorway job. Can we do your drive? Maybe it's one of those jobs, I don't know. The problem, the minister's doomed if he does, doomed if he doesn't. At least he's doing, not just talking, says Peter. All right, Pete, thank you. Robin Peel called. I think it's a lot better, he says. It's a short-term fix, but it was definitely needed. If it only lasts 2 years, that's good. It's not a waste of money. It's a lot better. Good. Excellent. Oh, we're getting a general thumbs up on the programme today. That's unusual. Well done, DOI. I bet the cost will be saved in a year of fewer insurance claims for damage to cars. I expect you're probably right at that sort of money, yeah. I presume that the 40 grand is only for the bit that they've done, so it'll be more than that, the whole thing, surely, won't it? I, for one, am pleased that something's finally being done on the prom. My fillings can remain in place, says Carol. Well, yes, generally, not many people seem to be against the scheme. It seems to be going down quite well. It is slightly strange to look at from the picture that I was sent earlier on. It really is just a case of, well, I'll tell you what, let's just run a truck down the middle of the road and drop some tarmac off it and then get a roller to follow around it. I mean, it doesn't go up to the edges kind of thing, but not a bad thing. I mean, we don't have to have fitted carpets, do we, these days? I have to say, and I've thought this a few times when we've talked about the promenade and about road resurfacing schemes and things like that, especially with the promenade, I'm surprised because on the basis that most of the work, according to the Minister, needs being done below the surface to the services that are below the surface of the road, and people say, well, the minute they resurface it, vast cost, then somebody else will be along to dig it up because they need access to pipes or whatever. It's always struck me strange that there isn't some sort of a system whereby there's maybe right down the middle of a carriageway like that. Let's face it, the middle of the road doesn't get that much use, does it? Where the white lines go down the middle, that doesn't get an awful lot of use. So why not have roads laid out so that down the middle, underground, you've got a tunnel that runs the entire length of the road that all the services can run through? So if you get some sort of a problem, then it's relatively easy to go down into the tunnel and, you maybe have access grids every 100 yards or something like that, I don't know, so that people could get down there and so on. Now, I expect, because I'm not a civil engineer, that there's a very good reason that they can't do that, but you would think that some sort of a proprietary system that would allow roads to be built that way would save all this problem of laying a decent road surface, then having to dig it up every 5 minutes and patch it and stuff. You'd be able to do it all underground. So if you've got a broken pipe or something, you've got fairly easy access to it without having to dig the thing up. Comment, I've got 20 years worth of prom cruising to catch up on now. You can promenade at your leisure now, can't you? I asked David Cretney a couple of years back on this programme about the joint, or rather jolt, where the prom met the sea terminal roundabout. He claimed he didn't know of a problem. 2 weeks in post and Mr. Harmer filled it, says Paul. Well, there you go. Definitely positive today, and it's a Friday as well. I questioned an amount of money that somebody put in a text earlier on, queried it, and actually you were right and I was wrong. I hate to admit it when I'm wrong, but I was. So, yes, a total spend today. Catherine sent me the Hansard report. A total spend today is £3,017,618.59. So you were right when you said 3 million and I was wrong questioning that. I think the problem is the sewer. Every sewer from every flat on the prom probably has to cross the prom in the walkway where the main pipes are, says Liz. Yeah, they do. And Catherine also said that in the plans that were on display at the sea terminal, there was some sort of a thing whereby something like what I was talking about was going to be incorporated in the thing. She wasn't sure if it was down the middle or down the side of the road, but some sort of a thing to reduce the need for people to dig the road up in future. In Germany, Stu, they have channels on each sidewalk, and every so many metres they link to the other side of the road, says Bill. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it just strikes me that it's not a very evolved way of building roads the way that we do it. We build a road and put the foundations down with all sorts of pipes and things in there. It doesn't seem to be very thought through to me. You would have thought that, like I say, some sort of proprietary system could be used that would make access so much simpler. But we'll have to wait and see, I suppose.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks as ever to everyone who contributed to the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or get your thoughts to us via Facebook or Twitter using the hashtag #MRTalkingHeads. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, let us know by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being sure.
Terms and conditions apply.